Amazing World of Steve Jobs by Nana Nikuni. Have you ever heard of Steve Jobs? He was the CEO of the Apple company. I think some of you owns an iPhone or an iPod Touch or even an iPad. He was the creator of those magnificent inventions. Why I chose this topic. Last year, my dad started buying the Apple products and he let me use it, and it was very interesting and very useful. Then I wondered, who invented these inventions? Then I found out that it was Steve Jobs who invented these inventions. I wanted to learn more about his life. That was why I chose Steve Jobs for my ISP topic. Birth and biological parents. Steve Jobs was born on February 14, 1955. His mother was Joanne Simpson, and his father was Abdullah Janjandali, and he was a Syrian man. When Steve was born, they wanted to marry, but Joanne's father didn't let her marry a Syrian man, and as a result, they brought Steve for adoption. This is Steve Jobs when he was a baby, and this is their biological parents. Adoption. His parents wanted him to be adopted by a college graduate because they wanted Steve to go to college. First, they found a family that was a college graduate, but they canceled adoption because they wanted a girl instead of a boy. Next, they found another family, and that was the Jobs family, which is now his parents right now. But there was one problem. The problem was that they both never graduated college. His biological parents hesitated, and they thought and thought. Finally, they agreed, and Steve was adopted. When he was adopted, his parents, the Jobs family, was promised to let Steve go to college. New home. When Steve was adopted, they lived in San Francisco, but when he turned 2, they moved to Mountain View, California. And at the same time, they adopted another child, a girl, and they named it Patty, and Steve became a big brother. In their new home, his father and Steve worked in their garage. His father showed him how to rebuild cars and how to put machines together. And there were other neighbors who worked in their garage, and Steve sometimes visited them and worked together. When his father had free time, he rebuilt cars and sold them. That was how his father was working hard to save money for his college. This is the picture of their garage, and this is Steve Jobs when he was young. Interest in technology. When Steve got bigger, he joined a club called Hewlett-Packard Explorers Club. That club was for people who liked technology and electronics and who wanted to learn more about it. In here, the HP engineer showed them the products they had made and showed them how it works. Steve got very interested in electronics in this club, and he wanted to learn more about it. Stephen Wozniak in Blue Box. Soon, Steve Jobs met a person called Stephen Wozniak. And Stephen Wozniak was very important in his life because he was the co-founder of the Apple company. And he was an electronic whiz kid, and he was 5 years older than Steve. When Steve met Stephen Wozniak, he was very surprised because he was the first person who knew more about electronics than he did. When they got further friendship, they built a machine called a Blue Box. A Blue Box was a phone, but it wasn't just a phone. It was a phone that can make free calls over the world. They sold this to other companies and other college students, and they made a lot of money with this machine. College. Soon, Steve was old enough to go to college. He wanted to go to the Reed College, which was a small liberal arts school with high academic standards, and it was very expensive. When his parents heard this, they was very worried entered this college. But he dropped out really quickly because he was interested in other things. And he came back to his hometown. When he came back, he had to find jobs. And he found the Atari company. And he got a job as a design engineer. And after working here, Steve went to India to meet the teachers and to find new life. But he came back in 7 months because he got sick. After he came back from India. And a few years later, he met a woman named Lauren Powell, and she became his wife. And his first child was Reed Jobs, and his second child was Aaron Jobs, and his third child was Eve Jobs. This is Steve Jobs, and this is Reed Jobs, and Aaron Jobs, Eve Jobs, and this is his wife, Lauren Powell Jobs. Soon, a few years later, the technology has developed and he invented the iPod Touch. iPod Touch was like a small computer. We can listen to music, we can record things, and we can download games and music, and we can also play games on it. The iPod Touch was able to connect to the internet by using the Wi-Fi. iPhone. iPhone almost had the same function as iPod Touch, but the new function was GPS. GPS was a function that can tell your friends or your family where you are, and the phone function. iPhone was able to call somebody. And one more thing was the 3G antenna. iPhone can connect to internet by itself. Didn't need the Wi-Fi connection. iPad. iPad had the same function as iPod Touch. But the only difference was that it has bigger screen and was more easier to use because it had more area to type and it was easier to watch movies and videos. Connection with God. Steve Jobs. iPad. Steve Jobs invented these inventions. And these inventions was able to move things around with our fingers. Like this. Connection with God. Steve Jobs made these magnificent inventions. But he didn't make these inventions by himself. God gave him power to do these things. So God made our lives better through him. So we have to thank Steve Jobs that he made our lives easier in creating those magnificent inventions, and also God that he gave power to Steve Jobs to make those magnificent inventions. Thank you for watching my presentation.